Today, Rinpoche continued his detailed explanation of the suffering of birth, elucidating the words with Jayan Sheba's outline. Right? Okay, so once again we'll be looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and we'll begin on page 271 is where we, the top heading is the actual meditation on suffering. So that's the general area where we're going to begin today. Lamrim Chenmo Chipa. Sumba dan Jepa Chipa.
Ta kwa jiwa na chaba dangwa dang. What dan ma nyomu gunha tu dongwa wo sa. Ta jiwa me de jin de jiwa wo de jiba de ba. Jo jiba de nga ba de ba.
Jipa de Nyomon, Jewa Nyomon Ju.
Take the Jibaro, Napa Dinsare. Joe Mendojin to Ray Juni be doing one there. Joe Tanchi, Tachi, Choale Mandishin, Teo Mendola, Tejan, Dungan Yuma Sheba, Yan Sambo was what this. Glad to the Lari, Jeremy Dino Dudun water.
Lesser.
Rajin,
Lesser.
Jindin or to do Teresha.
Napa de Dondagare.
Napa the Napa. Joe Mendojin, Ray Juni be laid on Yomo, call just a Shenji de la, and sugar, the Mendojin the sugar water.
Lesser, okay.
Choale Mandishin. They are Mendolas, Cho and Dumadi the
Doom, okay.
Chiggers, Choa Dejan. Dungan Kona Nua Sheba, Teyan Samba,
Lesser, okay.
What the Larindin and Dudijin or the Risha.
Lesser. So if you turn to page 272 in the English, we'll find the first of the 8 types of suffering. So under the major heading, the actual meditation on suffering, we have 2 categories: reflection on the universal suffering of cyclic existence, or the general suffering, and then reflection on the specific sufferings. So in that first category, we begin with the 8 types of suffering, and specifically now we're dealing with that first type of suffering, the suffering of birth. So when we look at Lama Tsongkhapa's smaller Lamrim text, which is the medium stages of the path to enlightenment, so this is the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. There's just as a note, a smaller text, which is called the medium stage of the path to enlightenment, not to be confused with the abbreviated stage of the path to enlightenment, which is the Lamrim Duda, and it's different. This is the Lamrim Din. And so Rinpoche is referring to that specific text, and he read, as I translated it, that's the section on this. So it's a much more condensed explanation, and it's somewhat easier to understand. So when we go to the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the suffering of birth, we find 5 categories. And when looking at Jayan Sheba's commentary, that section is actually broken down into 2 categories. The first category being those 5 categories, and then the second category is a summary of all of those points, or an abbreviation of those points. So turning to the medium stage of the path to enlightenment, we have the first category of the 5, which is birth is suffering because it is associated with pain. So it states in the medium stage of the path to enlightenment, it's very similar, because there are intense feelings of pain that accompany birth for 4 types of beings: hell beings, hungry ghost beings, those born from an egg, and those born from a womb. Birth is suffering, and so it's associated with pain. What pain? It's associated with painful feelings while the birth is taking place for those 4 types of beings. So that's the first category. The second category, birth is suffering because it is associated with dysfunctional tendencies. So all of the beings in the 3 realms, the form realm, the formless realm, and the desire realm, are in those realms because they are under the influence of karma and the afflictions. So all of their activities are influenced by these negativities. Therefore, because these seeds are present and always influencing, and these seeds, the karma and being the karma and the afflictions, it makes it so it's very difficult to engage in virtuous activities because of the opposite influence that one is always under. So this is the second category. The third category, birth is suffering because it is the origin of suffering. So when you're born into cyclic existence, that actual birth itself is the beginning of that suffering of cyclic existence, that it's the beginning of those sufferings that you have to endure within cyclic existence, such as the suffering of old age, illness, and death. So when you're born into any among those three realms, form, formless, or desire realm, you will, because of being born into them, experience these various types of suffering. The category number 4, birth is suffering because it is the origin of the afflictions. So when one is born into cyclic existence, there are three poisons that are present in influencing that being. Attachment, hatred, and delusion, or ignorance. So being under that influence, so because you're born into cyclic existence, there is this arisal of these three poisons. So as a result of that, you're always in pain, or I think it says disturbed by pain, disturbed and in pain, and it makes happiness very difficult. And then it states that the afflictions that come about because one is born cause large amounts of mental and physical suffering. So what that means is that when one sees something that he or she is attracted to, then we have attachment that arises. When one sees something that he or she finds not attractive or distasteful, then anger or hatred arises. And then if the object of observation is neither one that is found to be attractive or not attractive, then this neutral feeling of ignorance arises in relation to it. So that's the third poison, delusion or ignorance. Because one is under the influence of these things, one suffers, and the gateway into that experience is birth. So that's number 4. And number 5, birth is suffering because it is an unwanted separation. When you're born, that means that you will definitely have to die because that birth has taken place. So you will certainly, at some point in time in the future, die, and that's something that you don't want. That's an experience that's unwanted and will cause a great amount of suffering. So birth allows that to happen. So that's number 5. Dixon.
Otan jaji tamu ji de ngala ngaji ngada hebu kudu diba sajini diro ta hebu kudu diba da chebrato ngedu ji de ngala ngase do de larin din normal larin chemu de madu din normal so hebu kudu diba de ima larin chemu neja chusun ule ya tinjiba 팅아바들도 팅아바다 나스 대다나 지세서 오더네 해부고 되거든 말이야 나바도 차네 뇨아시바 오스 나바 찬으로 대다나 지세 오더 해부고 되거든 사례
So when Tanda Jogwe. Okay. So in the medium stages of the path to enlightenment, we don't find the various points that are made specifically about the womb and so forth. So that is omitted from that particular text, but we find that in the great treatise in the stage of the path to enlightenment. So after Lama Tsongkhapa in this text presents the 5, which Jangyan Sheba has as its own specific category, then there's a summary right after the 5 are presented, and that's that second category of Jangyan Sheba's outline in his commentary. So it begins here on page 273, right after that 5th category. Thus at birth you are bound to pain and endowed with dysfunctional tendencies. So that's where we'll begin, and then we'll get into the various sufferings one undergoes in the womb, which aren't found again in the medium stage of the path to enlightenment. So a summary of the essence would be the literal translation of the second category of Jayan Sheba's outline. A summary of the essence.
ane medoje de nawa da gawala subin jushi gres subata nyomo badna da nyomo chigres chwan den las tada ki jans ne nawa da gawa da nyomo badada ki jan ya je khol che ya jushi ne shati gungal che gunga shati che da na korajon wote sum de marbe khazonga susum de do tin sare te chi se dunga da che ba dans le don nyomo ki khol chi bi se dunga da che ba dunga da chin che yo res che ba ta ne ne la da de ba chi shin ne nyomo bi ne ne la da de ba nyomo bi chö da che bi gu ne che yo res chi shin le don nyomo ki khol che ba te jang jo she ba la te ne ne me de ji da na yong go re me de ji da ga la su bi ne dunga mo bi yong go res ane nyomo ane yidungwa la dosha chigare yidungwa la tene kontu chigare yidungwa mayo niga mayimba la tamu chigare dosung nyomo bad na tang ane chewan chen las yangcha chewa ki jushi gares tada ki chans cheba tan gawa tan nawa tan nyomo bad tada ki chan dukyanwa shebi tada ki chan yangcha kwal chi 동해 뉴욕 주시그레스 셰비 추 셈바셰바 오스 나드마 두운사레 what
the ne dungyonga bai nga
tadana 제비스 동해다 제바 동해다 레도 녀모모 코알 제비체 동해다 제바 제와레스 ane nengen deba nyomo bi nengen chöta cheba chewares che le do nyomo bo khwal cheba te jang ju sheba la tene medoje nayon wore medoje de gala subi donge ju shegres ane tala tene nyomo to son chegres to son nyomo ba na ta ane ya ja chewa ju shegres che sa shin je de shin gro ta chewan de las tada ki chance cheba ta nawa ta gala soba nyomo tada ki jan ya ja quality donge nyua ju shigres o tur santa de o de ngano lo de hedres to son din sare
the nga serna 5 nga
tamu donge jignan tamu ji donge nga marbe
aha
ngaro
okay gonga mepishi okay two chena so then this summary of the essence sections, we read, thus at birth you are bound to pain and endowed with dysfunctional tendencies. Birth leads to illness, aging, and so forth, as well as to the afflictions and death. Consider how these give rise to suffering as well. In particular, the suffering you undergo in the womb is described in Chandragroman's letter to a student. So this is the summary of those 5 points that were just presented. So it says then, at birth you are bound to pain and endowed with dysfunctional tendencies. So the afflictions arise because one is born, and so therefore you are bound to suffering. And then it says birth leads to illness. So as a result of being born, one is ill, one has to age and so forth, as well as to the afflictions and to the death. So birth is suffering because it is the origin of the afflictions, and then birth is suffering because it's an unwanted separation. So we find that all of the points are implicitly within this summary section. So independence upon these afflictions that we have as a result of being born, we become attached to the things that we find attractive or like, and we hate the things that we find not attractive or don't like, or the word hatred is very strong, but that's how we translate it, hatred, or here they translate it as hostility. So we have hostility towards things that we find not attractive, and then things that we find neither attractive or not attractive, unattractive, we have ignorance in relation to. So this is what is meant by being under the influence and independence upon that. We have to continuously cycle within cyclic existence. So this section here is saying, consider how these other things give rise to suffering. So last week we compared this to what came first, the chicken or the egg. So birth gives rise to these things, and then, but you can see how it gives rise to the various types of suffering, but you could see how then aging gives rise to the various types of suffering and allows for death to take place, which allows for birth to take place. So when we look at cyclic existence in terms of that cycle, we say which came first, the we could compare it to that idea of what came first, the chicken or the egg, when we're saying what gave rise to what. Was it the birth or the death, etc.? So that's that second section in Jayan Sheba's commentary, a summary of the essence.
What the Dungajian Tambu Chi Dunga the Lawa, the Natan, he could do a Sajini Jiroa, Mansarota, and the neighbor could do what don't do down Chishinis, don't do Tandatre, that I know Jishati the Gunga said that, don't do Droa. That Chabat Sheba's Chindo, Chabat Shebat what the Nana everyone doing a shake and what the Chabat Shebat Lotte Yundua.
Oh, they ne dung nga. Okay. So then in Jayan Sheba's second section, which is a summary of the essence, there are actually two categories in that. First is the summary of the essence, which is what we're reading here, and then a broader explanation of it. And then that's when we get into the 5 types of suffering that one has to undergo in the womb. So that summarized part has 2 categories: the summary of the summarized essence, and then the broader explanation of a summarized essence. Yeah, that's it. Dikson Rinpoche.
Oh yeah, the do the Chishi Tambutawa. Tawa Tangan never doing jet what the jet lay on to do not Jihini on Gosare. Taina Chim to Tambutanga, Nana never doing a shake and do a narrow. Doing nagan on Tambudere, Nana never say, doing a genuine, Ami to good Puguchi, Ami to good Puguchi, Amat Pugut, Nana never say what they're doing it in the water, Nayo doing a Tambudere. Chabrato, Yana Nebice, Donga Nuane, routineless, Lumazandagum, routinely, Shindomazi Tanga Mazan, Chivitis, Shindomazi Tanga Mazan, Chivitanga, Shindomazibi, what the Chamang Batan, Mazan, Pogo to Kuman, the Bennett in the Euro, the Tina, the donation that you are, say, Kiringasa. Radu Toba, Ami Tuguno, Pogo Yasat, Koyamaka, Ben Lujanda Marva, Kosutubres, Radu Tobas, Radu Toba Menas, what in the light in out and the Maromet, Nahuris, Nahun. Mena Tibur and Dubai, Mena Tibo, Nahun, what the Ami Tuguno, what the Ben at the Nolul Pogo de Euro, what the Nahun Resita. Tibetan Dubai, Nene, Nyawatabi, Nathan, Shune, Tishune, and Le Yonkonla, Dungacham, Nagus, Tagus, Sheson Batarosa, Tal Le Yonto, Dodochi, no what they command Luna, I mean to know what they Dungam Nugu, what is on the Zamarva, Sheson Batarosa. What about Jiju and the mother?
Then Nangwang, Yerbe, me Chanka Jama.
Mother, Naganon Tambutrota, Naganon, Nena never doing Nayo, Naganon, Tambuchi.
Okay. So the suffering of the womb has 5 categories, and the first one is this. So in particular, the suffering you undergo in the womb is described in Chenrezig's letter to a student. After you have entered the womb, which is like hell, hold on 1 second. I just want to make sure I'm not translating something incorrectly. Okay. After you have entered the womb, which is like hell, you're hemmed in by foul-smelling filth and trapped in a pitch-dark gloom, your body cramped, you must undergo enormous sufferings. So here, this is speaking of a fetus that is in the womb, and Rinpoche is saying it's like being inside of a bag. So it's being inside of a bag, and inside that bag there's various bad smells, and it's quite dirty inside, and there's no light whatsoever, and it's almost trapped. It says trapped in pitch dark gloom, but bound, held there. Without being able to go anywhere. So that word trapped gives that essence. But so trapped in pitch dark gloom, your body cramp, you must undergo enormous sufferings. So this is the first category, and this is in Chenrezig's letter to a student.
Noso kawa chugun ama chugun bugu diodrwa what the mazawa naba me noso kawa simbugri tongcha mobi ne shinto changa yuse tenon bo mo bo bak changa yi kunyi da deba kunyi song di tuba tangsa jimba tangsa inso na kunyi da deba rebi bagatan kombo tomata deba rebi bagatan rugu da uluma rugu yoro bagatan pu tomata deba asa jin da leba da leja da jin da jimba da leba da leja what to sort leba le shun jimba logumando son deba so ramare redisha ta ma de wote jimba da an khala go wote ko ronda ji yoro what to so din sar leba da leja da na gi chuji denjen jendo phu wol yore lonka tinto rugu on bu chasa to de udu yirobata tinas kan gisil tenje jod ame tugul ten mendo ander ne jeda de yosare jone tu baba la tente dawar rejin da chen jong yu ne ta sa dawar amal da chen khorin za mendo a tenza dule jibu de jiwan jimendo ko zubuya jongyan jena what about tambutre tambo ngena de dunga in tambo what about re
chu kanga losen
ngena de dunga in tambo to what about re tobre ulma mai se so about ma dunga ni badre
then kabarka the
kayander in the katudre and the origin that sends zabin tas ote chete tambure mai says don mani balendo
the mase okay tuchina
yeah
so the first category in Jayan Sheba's outline about the suffering of the womb is also found in the Descent into the Womb Sutra. So when we look for the source of Chenrezig's points that he made in the letter to a student, we find it in this sutra here. So I'll read up to the point where the first category ends. Filthy, so this is in the Descent into the Womb Sutra, explains the meaning of these words. filthy with quantities of urine, brain-like substances, thick saliva, and marrow. The fetus dwells above the intestines and below the stomach, in a space which is filled with many kinds of filth, and is home to a myriad of bacteria, with two very foul-smelling openings and hollows and apertures in the bone. Its front faces the vertebrae and its back the stomach wall. It is nourished every month by its mother's uterine blood. So this is the first category of suffering in the womb. So just going through it, filthy with quantities of urine, brain-like substances, thick saliva, and marrow. The fetus dwells above the intestines and below the stomach in a face filled with many kinds of filth. So here it's a very foul-smelling, dirty place, a filthy place, and then home to a myriad of bacteria. So Rinpoche said a myriad of bugs. So they use the word bug in Tibetan. In the Tibetan language, the word for bug is used. So with two very foul-smelling openings. This is referring to the place from which urine comes, and then the place from which feces comes. So that's the meaning of the two very foul-smelling openings and apertures, and openings and hollows and apertures in the bone. Its front faces its vertebrae, and its back the stomach wall, and it's nourished every month by its mother's uterine blood. So this is the first category of why the womb is suffering. There was, no more. Less so.
세제 나바 수유 청원이 지 시모로 셰신 네 메바메발레 오네 카이 마이 점마다 카주렘바다 디네 레자지 바바 주바단 자와사 레자지 칼라마사사도 토바네 제렌도 어떤 들러데 잡무도 디네 레자지 바바 주바단 자와 세지 로콘에 뒤버가 다마도 보건데와 타반다진도 어때 아마 칼라세 세근에 버도데 주도 보고로는 보 마셔 정어야 돼 네버도 어때지고레스 카이마이 저다 안에 가서 세지 로콘에 뒤버가네 스티버가 되는 바 타반다진도 어때네 세기 주도 보고로고레스 그간에 주변에 제지선 보고야 지원거스. 다들 어떤 보고 고라 파민 고라니 그 나시 조사도 다음 주중 좀 하디요 말어. 다는 너는 다다 고체체치는 감바들 라바도 지원거스. 어떤 소문된 사례. 너는 보다 뭐뭐보다 나나보다 그렇고 간라 종유고 용수조 최종 체체체는 감바들 라바도 정원에 송된사래 저원주신스 텔라 라바다 감반 잠반네 샤이 트리티스 라바다 간다 간라 로로제네 아메 조군을 베네진으로 요데 말베 워도 송데타 라바다 감바다 잠반네 샤이 트리티스 나셔사진도 네 저마 나셔사진도 가서 나시 말베 나시 베베 나시 비야 나셔사진도 네 정가와 남제바 메나 청원에 예매도 좀 메나 청원에 예매도 줘서 메나 청원 조금을 나호로다 전정도 연구소 말로 온 거예요다 세주로 카와다 쪼가다 아메 칼라 로카와다 쪼론 렘보라다 근데 세베 베바 사손나온데 보고 넣고서 렌사당 사게 넣고도와 차와 당서 kawatansen kala chabu balen ratan o chora chabu nam den sebina bugul nyogo soro bugul lyoku sabar wote dunge nyon chuchu injir wota mata tabo tagin ris amal chonda tan wote kala sa tu bugul nyogo soro sin joma jinto mazan yu ku no sos ne jugu no lo simbu bo bagyo ro de mazan ko adu san ko jigu ro de na jin bu de den da bures ku no so mazan wa nyang ra to ba yu na je na to son sa mazan wa jaba marbe mazan wa nya ba ra to ba yu da je na to son sa wa de jugu de ba de Mazai Dama number what the no book Jedioris and the book su dembio maris, Shechuris, su go on the matin. My Lujanaki mene Amalul Tabjur or digger book nogos. My Lujanaki mene Gundo don Yonsu don Ta Rodsa what did get ta. Si kundu si yonsu si jin dengen tsuwa chenmo trabu tsubu mazeba yi to mongwa nyongwa njoro sa ngen chidu wade nipa todere teba da aman kala sa yatan wade nila tene pugul dengen wares wade izare nipa tere.
Okay, so the second category is deals with the effect that food and drink that the mother takes has on the child, so on the fetus. So it says, the bits of food its mother has eaten are ground by her 2 rows of teeth and swallowed. It is swallowed, the food is moistened from below by saliva and the oozing of mouth sores, while it is polluted from above by thick saliva. The remains of that vomit-like food enter from above through the umbilical cord's opening and generate growth. Though through the thickening, quivering, elongated, and globular stages, the embryo is completely transformed into a fetus with arms and legs. The placenta encloses its arms, legs, and cheeks. Reeking like an old rag used for mucus, the stench is unbearable. Enshrouded in pitch darkness, it moves up and down. The bitter, sour, pungent, salty, spicy, and astringent taste of food affect it like hot coals. Like an intestinal worm, it feeds on filthy fluids. It finds itself in a swamp that oozes rotted filth. Its life force is unstable. The heat of its mother's body torments, heats, and overheats it, all in 3 degrees, slightly, moderately, and greatly. It experiences distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agony whenever its mother... Okay, so that's where it stops, agony. Then Sumba Ama the draw, the Kagdu...
That's what Aman Doya, the Aman Lekajea, and then what the Sumba, what in the Rendo, Sumba
Delpa Nelago,
Sumba
Delpa Lama Sorge, that's more. So whenever the mother has, for instance, a hot tea to drink, this hot fluid affects the fetus and causes its suffering. Or if she has something that's very cold, for instance, a very cold food, then that will also affect the fetus and cause its suffering. So the mother eats whatever foods she wishes, chews them up, and then that food, whatever is left through this digestive process, is kind of this leftover material that's like a vomit that goes through the umbilical cord opening into the baby. So what happens is there isn't an instantaneous growing of this fully developed baby. First there is the male and female substances that come together, the red and white secret substances, they come together, and then there is a baby or a fetus that is at that moment of conception where they come together. At that point there is a baby, and then the growth takes place and the various sense faculties, the various the wombo I mean ne nang la the wombo the tambo the pa and ma kutra nyamdu
kutra chujuji ma de maro
bene
kale chichir no no tata butu
the wombo then
kamba de la butu
okay. So the substances, the white and red substances come together, and then there is a slow growth that takes place, and then there is a forming of the eyes, and forming of the arms, and forming of the legs, and so forth. So this takes place over time, and through that whole process, the fetus is experiencing these types of suffering. So this is the first type of suffering that we went over, dealt with the various environment within and the smells and so forth. This next category deals with the food that the mother eats and the reaction that the baby has to it. And then the third category we're going to get into is the suffering that takes place from movement of the mother. So that will be the third category that we get into. But if, and for another thing, I just forgot one thing to translate. If the mother eats something that's rough or hard, such as a hard type of bread, hard piece of bread, then that will also cause a suffering to the baby. So we see all these various types of suffering that the baby has to undergo as a result of being in this environment that he or she is born from. Okay, so we'll take a short. So in this section, we have many points that are made about how dirty the inside of the mother is in relation to the baby and so forth. But when we look at the male and female body, the inside, in terms of how dirty it is, are exactly the same. There's no difference. So and the points that are being made here aren't exclusive to the female as far as the foul smells and the lack of cleanliness. They're just the points that are being made here in terms of the womb itself. But there's no difference between a male and a female's body in terms of the dirtiness and foul smells.
Ninja Juju Tal Tini Badro, Tini Bajildua, Cheta Cheta Sadre. Taka Ama Gujuja de Lopul Nogos, Ama Gujuja, Andrea, and Jumping Water Jena, Bull Nogos, Ama Dutica, what the Bull Nogos.
Duchi, got
big.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
I don't know the column about the Sultan Amal Buja, was Lekaji Wars, Shinkal, then two Ogure, then Lekandamana Movijagur, Amal Buja, was Maris, Chibun Chasa, didn't take Shamar Jagu and Mato, or the Bugul Nogos. Cheta, my you are going to you are the Yonsu, you are the Tatayan. The Jimba Ngay Jimba Dan May Tonto Tabangai Done and then Menol Usha Dabres Ame to Nola or the Jeta Mayo Adan good you Adan and then also you are the Jimba Ngay Tabangai Bugudon and then Menol Usha Dabres Dunga you are res Jimba Dan Mama Tonto Juba Tabo, Muton to Juba Tabo, Tabangai down, and then Metsaboyas than the usual robbery, doing Chibuares, Tabo, doing Soa Chambo, Trabas, Juba Mazeba, Yidumoa, Pushawa Kawa, Nuan Juro, Shezon Sauce, Tejin to me, say Hajan Nuatan. Nuance about Hajan, 통바다 아마 칼라니 용산에 아보고 지내고 서로 안 샤체 오요 남도 데즈리나 보고 노고요도 하정 통바다사 전에 장와 아이시 전에 와라드 드링크 두수 보고 노고 서라 장와다 차와다 안 자차보다 렌차슨 차로 차도 보고 노고 서로 사초와 네 좋아 좀 렘보라면다 나모 카와 차와 안 스베다 두수이지로 하장 가유리 차보드네 세바다 너바제와 아메다 코스 두술 보고 강에 요아레스 쇼바다 하장 주바다 총바다 제바다 메이나도 메이 정도 두바 아마 메이 정도 대바인 보고 내고도 와 아마 조조제네 보고 동에 요서로 도나야 안에 내나 내발라 내바 송신 내나 보고 내 송요아레 상제다 안에 르벤센다 고모도 신지로 페이거 롱기 테네스 페이거스 포와드 마코샤 나머지로 롱갈 테네 보고 두스네 진방에 타방에 진네 진방 세신의 조바진도 내가 송소 저바도 송바
Rinpoche, this sumba, then garisheni, the nipa dang jar, the lemba dan sapo dan jat sapo dan garisheni
the rabundo the mrabundo chonjaja to yua dan da kosu to kakayungudo
ale then ni dang sum nyamdu sumba kuna
kashin rabundo da
then the giant sheba the sache sumba
사지 송바데 제대로 마유와다 모두 유와다 용소 유와데 다바다야 진방이 진바다 타방에 되네 그것도 문이 요소다
this sumba 얘네 데 라면성 카페
어디 송바 콘레
okay
셰송소 어디 바드레
then 라면성 카페 젤파
라마 셰송소 대신 도사 다 젊어져 아마게 세 하장 용사나 보고 내그레스
then this sumba
말 어디 송바래
okay 딕선 네데 라기
어디 봐도 어디래 내나 제이서 어디 봐도래
then it sender gomen lung sumba
어디서 그거 자상래
okay two china okay so we're still in number 3 in Jayan Sheba's outline and this deals with the mother's movement. So whenever its mother moves a little, let me just read up to it. The heat of its mother's body torments, heats, and overheats it all in 3 degrees, slightly, moderately, and greatly. It experiences distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agony. So that ends the second category in the relation to food. Now third category, when mother's movement. Whenever its mother moves a little, moderately, or greatly, it also moves in the same way, constrained by 5 bonds. It experiences agony that is distressing, intense, violent, unbearable, and almost inconceivable, as though it had been thrust into a pit of burning cinders. So the baby is constrained like as if it had 5 ropes around it and being held there. And then this last part about being thrust into a pit of burning cinders is related to these being tied or constrained. So if one was constrained and then thrown into a pit of burning cinders that he or she couldn't get out of. So Rinpoche, the tarpa nga, the trunk nga, garishine nga. Okay, so if there are 5, I said, why is there 5, this 5? He said if there's... Okay, so if there were 5, you couldn't get out. If you wrapped it around you 5 times, then it would really constrain you and then I'm not trying to critique the translation, but if this rope had been wrapped around 5 times and you were really held back and then thrown into a pit of burning embers, this is what would be a similar type of suffering. Then, similarly, it is said that the fetus is harmed in the womb when the mother eats too much or too little, eats food that is too oily, pungent, cold, hot, salty, sweet, sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, or astringent, indulges her sexual desires, runs too much or too fast, jumps or swims or sits or squats in the front of the fire. It is also said that the fetus is confined by the stomach and held firm by the intestines as though it were bound by 5 bonds or impaled on a stake. There is even further suffering when the infant emerges from the womb and is born into the outside. Chenrezig Roman's letter to his student says, "It is crushed slowly like sesame seeds in an oil press, and then somehow it is born. Nonetheless, those who do not lose their lives immediately must settle for pain. The body that dwelt and grew in that filth is smeared with the womb slime and has an unbearably foul smell. Memory is lost upon being inflicted with such torment, which is like having an inflamed boil burst or being on the verge of vomiting." So this section deals primarily with the movement. My question is it seems like number 2 is also in this as well, about the foods and so forth. And Rinpoche said that it still falls under the 3rd category. Maybe it's the actual action of eating, if we translate it and look at the words a little more, the actual activity of eating, the moving, the going, the activity of eating these things that then results in that type of suffering. Whenever the mother jumps or runs or moves around very quickly, there is an amount of suffering that the child has to endure at that time. And in Kham, in Tibet, where Rinpoche is from, as a note, the women continue to work in the field through the whole pregnancy, and they begin to slow down a little bit as the child gets large, gets big, but they still continue to work. So that activity, that movement that is taking place causes pain in the infant. This is category number 3. And Rinpoche only read a part of Chenrezig Roman's letter. I just read it to the end, but it's all related, Rinpoche said, to number 3, the whole Chenrezig Roman quote. So this is 3rd in Jayan Sheba's outline. So this is a separate kind of enumeration than Lama Tsongkhapa's 5. So the 5 are just in relation to this one subject. They aren't in relation to somehow connected in terms of this connects to the 1st, this connects to the 2nd or the 3rd. This is a separate outline altogether that Jayan Sheba has. And one thing I forgot before, if we were to try to read this and figure out what all of these categories were, and what the real meaning of this text was without Jayan Sheba's commentary and points, it would be so difficult. Because how could we, Rinpoche said it like, how could we know that these 5 are here? Or how could we know these things are present in there without the commentary?
Routines, Amal Bogu Macho do Dungayore, Chitadul the Novat Bogul Dungayores, routines, then a range, Tima Jishi Sawai, Tima Jishi Sawai, Joatar shaded Tene, and Jishi Tarze, Nevajamala Sugu Mundukai La Sugumon. Takate what the book Amabogul Amalche on you, and I said, who get the sea, Marvesi. CG would treasure to see what you what the is. And Pogo Aman Machon do the who said, see the treasure and see how to hold on or tender bull to me or is that.
Just as a note, the Chenrezig letter actually begins number 4. So just Rinpoche said this is actually number 4. So 3 ends right before Chenrezig's letter to a student. There is even further suffering when the infant emerges, begins actually right there. There is even further suffering when the infant emerges from the womb and is born onto the outside. So that's the 4th category, the actual suffering of the birth itself. And then we have Chenrezig's letter. So it is crushed slowly like sesame seeds in an oil press, and then somehow it is born. So this comparison, Rinpoche just described it as it's written exactly in English. When we press seeds, an oil comes out, and they have to be pressed very, very hard in order for all of the oil to be extracted. Likewise, a baby that's being born is being crushed as it comes out through the birth canal. So there's a crushing that's taking place as the baby's being born that's compared to the extraction of oil, a seed being crushed.
What that know what the is doing what the tender come along drunk to us. Routine list, then reach. Tema Zishi Sawai, so that who's a Trucha, Sawai, Joa Tashi, Joa Tashi, Tene, Gigi, that say, which is Wenjan, Mela, Sumodo, and the sugar, Masho, the colors, Dungenia Wajibi, Naba. Dengan yajibe naba tozame mazan dana neji ri lutene ngene nebi tishin tanga maze den ziri neba ndote mami shibatar jula toba jindo hunji jambe bon She so what the center come along thing, but what then Tama to no Chenmo do Pogo the scene, Dogamo, your son is a college.
So Chenrezig's letter to a student says, it is crushed slowly like sesame seeds in an oil press, and then somehow it is born. Nonetheless, those who do not lose their lives immediately must settle for pain. So many die in this process, and many babies die during this birth process, and the ones that don't have to settle for this pain that's being described, of this crushing pain. The body that dwelt and grew in that filth is smeared with the womb slime and has unbearably foul smell. Memory is lost upon being inflicted with such torment, which is like having an inflamed boil burst or being on the verge of vomiting. There was no commentary. My gurus, that's what I'm just put in my coaching or so. That's what I should do when I was to think I said that I'm doing. When you lady, Naba people, when you lady, Naba people, Chibi, Lungi,
Gone Chen to Ten, Gone Chen to Tapu and do Languajanaba maybe leg, and Pogo Gusulu, some other. Tomboya Soso Jungo attended to Saro. And then look what the Pogo Gusulu and go to Martin, go to Henmaton was what the citizen. Leje, Naba Meba Leje, Longi, Gamba Gento Ten, and Gushu Long, Gamba Gento Ten, good night, 2 to 10. What the Sunga Mata on the Radan to Sukapu Gajibarim? Ah, Labani Kumba, Ruby, Chokurji, Jokuji, Zerkundus, Labani Jimbo, Chokun Madon, Amaten, Rugu, no goes. Zerkundus, Zeshin, Nasa Yores, the range toward Traba, Tuba Mazeba, Hidumo, Taki, Luigi, Masabatare, Luigi, Masabatare, Pokuchu, Lu Sabarota, no Ludi in the Dungenu Lilabin Zara, Sabatabo, Surgeon, Tanji, Hobajula, Surgeon, Zubumajon, the one that could trouble you, the Pugu Zubun Hobo Charman, Hobo Charles,
Lesser.
Luigi Ombo, Tangin, Luigi Ombo Tangin Tasa, could Tilmadon, the Ombo could Zubul Dunga Ta. Ngay Trishin to be ne, Lu, Ngay what the Tuba you, and Kakungoras. Kakumbi, Chudan, Drembatan, Tin Contessa, Kakune, and Chudan, Drembatan, to the Gabachadus. Ugulanson, Majiba Lansaman, Nomania, Shegoku, Kakungu. Cantes, Tubatan, Nyangawa, then Pumajon was a Tuburota, Nyangawa, Nyangawa, Maziba, Neba, Jutan. Change one, Judan change one, which leji, Naba Meba leji, Longi, Puas, which leji Naba Meba long tail was Talongi. Puana and Kagatar Taten Jong was both the Jing was what about the Jibare, Somba, Jibarwa, Jibar.
So then we have
College Loon, Teenagers, Tabujamadua.
Lesser.
Lesser.
So then we have the Descent into the Womb Sutra being quoted, explains the meaning of these words. And Rinpoche said the way that this is written is quite easy to understand because it's written almost like we would just talk, the way that we would speak or have a conversation. Just as a translator's note, a lot of the sutras and so forth and commentaries are written in a very encoded way, using a grammatical kind of patterns that are different than we would just speak with, and things are omitted that would normally be there and shortened and condensed, whereas this is written in a way that one would just speak. So that's what's meant by it's very easy to understand because we can just read it just like we would have a conversation. So most of the texts, and even the Lamrim Chenmo that's made very easy and palatable for us in English is not written in an easy way. It's written in a very encoded, difficult way in some parts that it really takes a scholar to be able to unravel it. So end of my commentary. But the Descent into the Womb Sutra says, thus, when all of its major and minor limbs have developed, the fetus stirs in a frightful, pitch-dark place of urine that oozes rot, has an unbearable stench, is contaminated by excrement and urine, and continually dripping with foul-smelling filth, blood, and putrid fluids. Energy arising from the maturation of previous karma makes its feet turn up and its head turn down toward the opening. So this is the only thing Rinpoche commented on. Because of this previous karma, the moment before the birth takes place, the karma influences the fetus, and it turns, and then it turns in a direction to head out to be born. So this actual turning arises, that actual energy arises from previous karma. It says, with both arms drawn in, it is, so, and then Rinpoche said, the arms are pressed together. I forgot, that's one other thing that he stated. The arms are pressed together in this way, and then smashed between the bones. So the arms are pressed together and then smashed between two bones. So it says, with both arms drawn in, it is slightly, moderately, and utterly smashed between two machines of bone. The distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agonies cause all the limbs of the body, painful as fresh wounds, to turn blue. All of the body's organs become hot. Since the uterine slime is now much reduced, the surface of the body dries out, and so the lips, throat, and heart become parched. So Rinpoche said the baby becomes very thirsty because of this drying out that's taken place. Confined and full of insufferable dread, it emerges. However difficult this may be, when drawn out by the influence of causes and conditions, by energies arising from the maturation of previous karma, once outside, the air burns like caustic liquid on the womb. The mere touch of the hand or a cloth feels like a cut of a sword. It experiences distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agony. So this is number 4. The actual suffering that takes place while the birth is happening. So the 4th is the suffering the baby experiences when it's being born.
So the
5th category is once the baby is out and has been born, then and it's being held, for instance, then there is suffering at that stage as well. The ngapa, the do nangla.
Teshoma tato so what the ngabare ngaba. Teshoma pugut machi tadu tat labang jugro. What the dungamu was. Teshoma tato shiruji sa lumala trabe riba tabo labang guji rina. Redi jebajinto dungeji tsua Chenmo traba tuba maziba yido moa nyuan joro she song sa tapugo maji tsaba dan lansan laban ju ni tolu nam den jaba ina wate redi den luzubu jeba tsuba dam dunge waris kupugo nolu le den shilu ma den sa dunga su tolu dan laba redi Pugul dunga yusarwa. Te shoma tato sa. Pugul shoma tato pugul jit tsaba dan langsang. Tama tato shiruji lung shiruji lung dare tsare. Zitrabi riba tabong Laba kuji ta laba kuji bugun jugro ta kuji riba na regi den tragi che handabo dunge waris jeba jinto dunge ji tsuwa chenbo traba suba mazeba ido mo nyuan juros she song shins what tanda te chegumdo den ore she song shins Palang Papa Shubala, Suchaji Subatan, Zijin Lu Chubala, Jaki Trabatar, Dungan Trabu Nua Jinto, Tema Taba, Pando, Lamba Sudan, Tsawatan, Tranyu Ribanaya, Dungan Trabu, Tuba Mazeba Ito, Moa. Nyuan juro so what about not soundrita? Not what about it?
Then the ngapa, the sheson, then the palang, then gaduka. Kabaka.
Ta no what the
Palang.
ta got the Palang Baba she was babe the
Palang
seeking
Baba.
sick the babe in the seeking Felicitan books ever doing your tender viewers. Palang with the babe with the seeking members over and then be over doing Chaburo. Then not your book, Lud Sabaro, doing swat of viewers.
Then they call.
What the something is.
Okay, so number 5 begins within the body of the Descent into the Womb Sutra. So I'll show you where it stops. So number 4 stops confined and full of insuperable dread. It emerges, however difficult this may be, when drawn out by the influence of cause and conditions, by energies arising from the maturation of previous karma. And then now number 5 starts, once outside. The sachang ngapa mingare giant sheba ngapa
de
ming
ngapa de
shilo
ngapa tsema ta suji dongenes tsema ta suji dongesa ugu tsema ta donge wares.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to check to see if Giant Sheba's outline name was actually once outside, but it's when birth has taken place. So when the birth has taken place, the suffering it endures when the birth has taken place. So once outside, the air burns like caustic liquid on a womb. So the air itself actually hurts the skin of the baby once it emerges from the womb. Once it leaves and is born. Then it says, the mere touch of a hand or a claw feels like the cut of a sword. So just the parents touching the baby, the fingers feel very, very rough and very sharp on the skin. It experiences distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agony. It is said that when taken up onto someone's lap and the like, or touched by hot or cold objects, the newborn baby experiences distressing, intense, violent, and unbearable agony, like a flayed cow being eaten by vermin or a leper whose lesions are struck with a whip. So this is all falls into category number 5, and that's where the 5th category ends.
Tendu do ta de shoma ta sa do ngaba je ngaba de ta nyebu do ne wa da nyebu do to de nyebu do ma du nga ma du je wa da
Hale, you're a Giant Sheba.
O de yo
de then the ne dungyo ma
tendu de la tendu da cheba ji do nga ze lo tendu ba de de the what the so donge ji na ne cha tamu de ta tama ne chir she de gu gu be ha she ba tar su tu bi she ra ji ya da de ji de gu ba sha wo what the donge ji na no what the donge ji na ne tamu ji donge de ta tama ni wa le pom nga de ne ke chu res the so ngalo shera ji ne ya ne ru gong gu res da du won ja de de ji na ne jang da mu de da mu ji de ma de ji de la nga ro ne tama ne wa le pom nga ne chi she de gong gu be ne wa le pom nga de ga wa de sa za jin gong gu res gong gu be ha she ba dar su su tu bi shera ji ya da ya ji gong ba sha wo what the tamal ma je me sumba na je wa de shera ji ne ya ne gons ma de du do de res ta
then the dungyo jibo karong the tambo
dungyo ji na dungyo ji ro ji na tambo de da nga ba pombo nga ni wa le de nga sa ji ro what the ni de wa nga chu res 대신 서서진 공부를 싫어 집어시네 야네도 공부를 어떤 손이 있어요. 대전다 두용을
제 둥요 탐보. 오케이.
어디 자지 어디 저기서 들 고알렌 자르면 가서 들어 두고 말거든. 자지 어디 저기서 두용을 했다.
Now this next part falls, when we're looking at Jayan Sheva's outline, abbreviated meaning, dundu. So we've gone through these 5, and then now we have a section called abbreviated meaning in the outline. And it says, among the 8 types of sufferings, regard this first type, so the suffering of birth, along with the 8th type, the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates, as the most crucial, and meditate upon both of them. Therefore, as explained before, you should repeatedly investigate them with discerning wisdom and meditate on them. And so now we arrive at the suffering of old age. Geshe then dene dundu.
Geshe da gai dunga nga yoro.
Lesso. Okay. So now we go to the suffering of old age, and then Jayan Sheva's outline, we find 2 categories. The Geshe, the broad explanation, and then the broad explanation, we have 5, these 5 categories again, and then Dundu, an abbreviated meaning. It's very similar. So we have the broader explanation and then the abbreviated meaning.
When the Gable Channel do what the Zoon's able to Maba Channel. Guy doing a Nale, Tombo, and Zombo, Yonson Yaba ne Keba Jutta Kuba, Keba Jutta Kuba down, Namgotai Matuta Kawa down. Trawa Dreden Tar. Hime Kimba Suji, Dunga Mobanya, Maduba Jo, so what they guy Dunga Nagan, Tampa Teresita, Tom, when the Zubu Gibichan was soon able to Mabachan or yonder is. I think Kaba Jutta Kuba, Zubu Gugu Channel, Guba down, go truck of child or truck of. Go try Matuta Kawa down. And drawing him do their mother, Himadu Sudia, with the Zubu Maduba Channel, Tata Nieme Kimba Suji, Lansu Yane, Maduba Josa, and soon they would Yana what they do ever chanders at that. Tom the water is shut.
Okay, so the suffering of old age. There are 5 points to contemplate. So the first, a handsome body deteriorates. Your back bends down like a bow. Your head is white like the drawa, grass flower. Wrinkles cover your forehead like the lines of a cutting board. In ways such as these, youth breaks down and you become unattractive. So as you age, even if you are beautiful when you're younger, that beauty deteriorates as you grow older, and you become more and more unattractive, the opposite of what you were. So once your youth is gone, that beautiful body begins to break down, and your hair that was once a color becomes white, and your skin begins to wrinkle more and more. So these are, and as a result of this happening, as your become unattractive and your beauty is lost, and your hair turns white and you have wrinkles, once this happens, it causes suffering. So therefore, old age is suffering, or the aging is suffering. Actually, this old age would be, I think, better at times to translate it as aging, because it's not only referring to that process of getting older. So that's number 1 among the 5 in the broader explanation section of Jayan Sheba's commentary. So we'll go through this slowly, and today we'll end class here. So if everybody wants to turn to the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. And anybody who's new, there's a board meeting, isn't there, right after class today? But if you have any questions about the center, you can ask any of the members that have been around for a period of time, and you'll be able to get a better explanation of what the center is and what we represent. I apologize, my introduction could have been a little bit better when I came in. I was trying to get things together, but it's really a wonderful opportunity to learn the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in a thorough fashion. It's very rare. So in order for our virtue to remain with us and become a cause for us to become Buddhas, we have to dedicate it. So we'll do the concluding mandala offering, dedication prayer, and the finishing prayers. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts, with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche, Gutsi Shapi Denronang, Lamrim